I've seen a lot of discussion about this game, and none I feel like captures the things that I like about it. Some of the discussion, like the mainstream discussion, sometimes kind of dances around the type of things that I like about it, but you know, it often gets lost in like story and spectacle kind of stuff as expected of mainstream video game discussion. The other side of it, the other type category of discussion that I've seen is from the arcade crowd, of course. I'm going to talk about the Electric Underground review because, you know, it's kind of the Steelman version of a lot of the discourse that I've been hearing from the arcade crowd. It is an excellent review of Resident Evil 9 as an action game. The problem is Resident Evil 9 is not an action game. Okay? It's just not. It's, at least it's not primarily an action game. So you watch this hour-and-a-half review, or you watch this review, you read this commentary, and it's like, yeah, that's true, but it's not really addressing the parts of the game that are good, the parts of the game that do work well. So the best part of the game, the way that I talk about it, is as exploration. So think about like Dark Souls. Like most people here have probably played Dark Souls or Demon Souls. Less so Elden Ring as an open world game. The constrained nature of the exploration in Dark Souls kind of matters for this. And the constrained like levels, like the fact that you are turning a corner and you have certain expectations when you turn that corner. There's more that's unknown. Let me frame it this way. Exploration is about the unknown. Okay? It's about, you have to appreciate exploration gameplay, you have to embrace the unknown as an interesting part of the game. And you know, if you know the Electric Underground, or if you know like a lot of the people who kind of fall into that kind of taste, you know that they don't really care about blind playthroughs. They don't really care about first playthroughs in general. Like the importance of the first playthrough to them is like dwarfed by the replayability, the future playthroughs. But if you're interested in video games in general and not just interested in like, you know, judging everything as an arcade game, if you want to know all the valuable things that video games can do and understand them all, then you need to understand this distinction and understand that there are some games that are more about the first playthrough. Like I feel like this should be obvious, but yeah. And they're less about the action as well. Like the action is there in this game to make your exploration choices matter. It's not there to create a cool like combat dynamic where you're like going back and forth between different enemies and like, you know, juggling all of these threats at once and keeping it all in your head. And like, it's not really about that. Like when a Resident Evil game, think about how much that this game is doing, and that all Resident Evil game, like, well, not 4 so much, because 4 kind of is an action game, right? At least more so. But all the way back to like Resident Evil 1, like think about Resident Evil 1's like transforming zombies, or like the surprise dog attacks. Like, and then for Resident Evil 9, think about the ways that they mix up the enemy placements. Like they try to surprise you with enemies waiting in a certain spot, waiting behind a corner with a grenade that if you hear the beeping, if you notice the beeping, you know, you can anticipate that. But like also you can anticipate like enemies moving to slightly different spots at a certain point in the progression through the game. You can anticipate enemies like crawling out from under a table. You can anticipate enemies like, you can have expectations about whether these enemies are going to stop, whether this enemy is going to stop doing what she's doing, like cleaning up the blood from the floor when you walk past, or, you know, you can have different expectations about these things. All of these things, all of these enemy placements and all of the patterns that they have, none of that is there to make interesting action for you. You know, when you see them, you then have to fight them. At least often you do, but it's not there for the action. The fight is not the point. The action and the action is there to make your exploration choices matter and to add tension to every move that you make. And, you know, this is why Dark Souls is a good analogy, right? Like, especially Dark Souls 1, like you are moving through a pretty constrained space. There's some branching paths, and you can like think about where those paths are likely to lead and stuff like that. But then when you're progressing down the main path, like they're intentionally putting a lot of traps. They're doing things to try to surprise you. Surprise is something that only works one time, right? So it should be obvious that this is mainly about the first playthrough rather than replayability. Yeah, it's often like one threat at a time, but those threats are surprising. They wouldn't be interesting if they were just out in the open and you walked up and you fought those threats one at a time. Like, it is all about how it interacts with the level design, which means that it's all about how it interacts with your expectations. And this is the tricky part about trying to explain exploration gameplay, because it's all about expectations. But for example, this game, Resident Evil 9, when at some point it like changes the enemies, the first time you go through the west wing of the care center, the enemies are all in a certain spot, but then at some point it mixes up a couple of the enemy placements. Like the butcher starts walking around in a different spot, and a couple other zombies start walking around at different spots. And that, you can't really expect that the first time you see it. But after you've seen it the first time, the first time you see it, like, it probably scares the shit out of you, which, or at least it's likely to if you walk around a corner and see it the same way that I did. Walk around a corner and this giant guy with a knife is standing there where you didn't expect it, where you thought you were safe because you've been through this area before. But the main purpose of it is to change your expectations for the rest of the game after that point. And for that reason, it's awesome. It's especially good that the Grace Care Center part, that's the best part of the game and has the most of this type of gameplay that I'm describing. It's especially good that it happens so early in the game, because even after they're doing less of this stuff later in the game, you're still in the right mindset from earlier. You're still thinking about it in that way and appreciating that stuff when it does happen. But yeah, the gameplay is, it's engaging with the game. It's engaging with what you don't know. And it is trying to have better expectations than you would naively have. Like, okay, let me go back, because one example this is like kind of a silly example, but I think because it's so minimal, I can actually talk about it clearly and explain. So this is what I assume action game fans would talk about as just pure downtime, right? You have to get past this butcher. The butcher is here to your left. And but to get around him, you could try to like sneak around him on the left side of this table, but that you probably have a good sense that that's not going to work, right? So you have to push this cart with a little vat of blood or whatever, not little, a pretty big vat of blood, and you have to move it very slowly, and it's one of these kind of semi QTE things that I assume people would just instantly dismiss as stupid filler gameplay, like not that interesting or whatever, or like it's supposed to be scary but it's not that scary. But with the right mindset, this is at least a lot more interesting than you think, if not actually genuinely good gameplay. I wouldn't quite go far enough to say that it's good gameplay, but there's a lot that you can think about here, and that you should be thinking about if you're treating this game as what it is, or at least what, to me, a survival horror type of game is. You can actually see this person is doing a horrible job, or at least they are like maybe they just already know because they've played it before, but like they're not looking at the butcher as they're pushing it. If you're playing this for the first time, you should be looking at the butcher as you push it, and you should be planning for every possible thing that could be about to happen. And because this is such a constrained scenario, there's only so many things that realistically could happen. And this goes back to, why Dark Souls is more interesting than Elden Ring. Like, Elden Ring is so open, whereas Dark Souls is like often just a couple of different choices at once, and like a couple of different things that could reasonably happen from here at once, right? Anyway, a skilled player and a player who appreciates exploration gameplay is actually thinking quite a lot here. Like when you're at this point, right, you're running through all sorts of scenarios and weighing their odds against each other and their risk levels against each other, because when something happens with the butcher, like when he stops chopping, or when he plays a voice line, like right when he says something new, or when he does some other animation, right? Like, you want to be ready to react quickly and act immediately and know what you're going to do immediately when that happens, because every second potentially counts. And if you're actually trying to enjoy the game, you don't want to just play this super slow and like push it a tiny bit and then wait and hide, and then push it a tiny bit more and then wait and hide. And also, you don't know, like maybe he could at some point walk around the other way and like catch you if you're taking too long. So for multiple reasons you want to make this go relatively quickly. So when you're pushing this thing, you should be watching the butcher and you should be thinking about what you're going to do in different situations. And so you kind of get in this pushing the vat of blood thing, you kind of get into a like, you know, situation like where you're driving toward the stoplight, or you're driving toward the intersection, right? The traffic light is green, but you don't know when it's going to turn yellow, right? And so you're just thinking like, okay, well, if I get a little bit farther, like if I get to this point, I will continue through the light. Whereas, you know, if I get not quite to that point, I'll slam on the brakes and stop at the intersection, right? Like you get into that type of situation, right? Where you're pushing this vat and you should have a threshold that you're developing in your mind of like, okay, if he does this, if he says his voice line, or if he like stops chopping or whatever after a certain point, then I'm just going to push it and continue through. But if he does something before I get to that certain point, then what am I going to do? Like, okay, am I going to like immediately stop? Am I going to like try to push it a little bit more to like get to make it more likely that I can finish getting around the next corner on the next like cycle or whatever, right? The next time that I push it, am I going to like, and like these type of things are determined by like a lot of factors. Like you have to look and see like, okay, am I like halfway yet, or am I not quite halfway? Or, you know, that requires you to look at the environment and make a judgment about like when you're going to be able to squeeze around that next corner. Right. And, it requires you to make judgments about like how quickly you're going to be able to get back to push it the next time after he, you know, turns around and goes back to whatever he's doing. And I mean, who knows, maybe he's going to go do something else after he checks on you and sees the cart moved. And like, you know, some of these things you can't really predict realistically, or at least like you can have ideas about what's going to happen, but it's such a small percentage chance that it's not actually going to affect how you play. But my point is like, there's a lot to think about here. And like, you should plan, like, you know, if he starts walking left to check on the other thing where he originally came from, like, are you going to stay in this corner, or are you going to bolt, or are you going to try to stay in this corner for a long time? And then if he gets close enough, then you're going to bolt. And then that starts to, as soon as you start thinking about that, you're then thinking about like, okay, well, what's outside? Is there a chance that there's going to be an enemy like in the doorway that I came into this area from when I start running backwards away from the butcher, and then I'm screwed and I'm sandwiched? Like there are infinite things to actually think hard about here. And it's interesting to optimize your experience here and optimize this to make it go as quickly and smoothly as possible. And those things are actually relevant. It's not like you're just thinking about things that are like super rare, not going to happen. It's like, there's a lot to think about just to make this go quicker and smoother, which you should want to do. Like if you're trying to enjoy the game, you should want it to go quicker and smoother. So yeah, I feel like that is a good example, but you know, a common pattern or a common type of example in this game and in Resident Evil games going all the way back to like Resident Evil 1 is like what you take from the item box. Like the limited inventory space makes it so that you have to make these kinds of decisions, or makes it so that you are incentivized to think about this kind of stuff. You're incentivized to think, okay, what am I likely to encounter? What threats am I likely to encounter in the next area? What key item stuff? What key items am I likely to be able to use in this next area? What am I likely to pick up, and how much am I likely to pick up? Like, is it an area that I've been to before and mostly cleared out and I just have to pick up a couple things, or, you know, whatever. Like, you know, like in Resident Evil 1, I've used this example in the past. Like in Resident Evil 1, the game makes it very clear in the opening cutscene that there are dogs outside, right? Like that there are these zombie dogs outside and there's a ton of them. And then it reminds you about this in multiple stages. Like it reminds you of it in the last part of the opening cutscene where like, I think Wesker or Barry or someone tells you like, you know, don't go back, you know, don't try to go back outside. Like you're going to die. And then like, so that should be like a reminder of the dogs. And then like the next time you go out on like a balcony, like on the east wing of the mansion, first floor, there's like a little outside, it's not like a balcony, it's like just a little outside courtyard space. And you see dogs and I'm pretty sure they don't attack you, at least in the remake, they don't attack you, but like, or maybe if you take too long, they attack you or something. But anyway, you can go out there and see the dogs, right? See them behind the fence where they can't reach you. So the game has reminded you multiple times there are dogs outside. So when you get the dog whistle item, even though you don't know what that's going to be used for exactly, you should be thinking, if you're engaging with the game in this way and noticing these things, these clues, you should be more likely to bring the dog whistle with you when you're going to an outside area. And then maybe slightly more as well, slightly more than nothing if it's like, and if you're going to an area that's like connected with an outside area, but it's, you know, like it's got windows to the outside or something. But especially if you were going outside, you should be more likely to want to bring that. Or like, yeah, and it's not just these type of decisions. Like there's like exploration is so many different things, right? It's all of this like dealing with the unknown and like anticipating and predicting, and it's everything about your expectations in games and how it causes you to play. At the very beginning of the game in Resident Evil 1, you go into the dining hall and then you kind of come back to the main room pretty quickly after that. And then after that, it's a little more open-ended, right? Like you can go back into the dining hall and keep exploring that way, like up the stairs where like birds eventually show up and stuff. Or you can go upstairs and into the upper floor of the dining hall. And something that you might decide as like a exploration-minded and like a thoughtful player of this kind of game is, okay, I'm going to go to the top floor first and go into the dining hall on the top floor, because I saw when I was in the dining hall lower floor before, I saw that there was an upper floor. And, you know, it seems like even if you don't notice anything specific there when you're on the lower floor, you can see that there's like, maybe I'm misremembering, but I think you can see that there's like gaps where you could potentially like drop down from above, which, by the way, you can't actually do that in Resident Evil 1. I'm pretty sure you can't drop down yourself from above, or maybe you can, but that's not the point. The point is you're thinking about what might be possible, what the game might let you do, what the game might be, what the game might show you. And you are doing your best to give yourself a smoother experience by having better predictions. It's not about predicting everything perfectly. That's completely unrealistic. Like it might be that every time in this game you have two options, you're trying to choose between two different things. A thoughtful, exploration-minded player will think like 100 times harder about that choice than an average player, and that will only earn them like a 55% chance of picking correctly instead of a 50% chance, or a 50% like 55% instead of a 50% like success rate of picking correctly, right? So like I'm not trying to like exaggerate this and make it seem like more extreme than it is. Like the wins from this are relatively small, but the point is that it's much more fun to play the game that way. It's much more rewarding that way. Like even though it's only that 5% difference maybe, like first of all, playing this game in this way makes you, and thinking about it in this way makes you a lot better at games that actually do block your progress when you're not good at this kind of thing. You know, a game like Return of the Obra Dinn is all about looking at your environment and trying to understand things that the game has not told you yet. A game like The Witness, like a lot of the optional stuff in that game, especially a game like Outer Wilds, you know, that game has a lot of tools or kind of like stuff to help you, like the ship log and stuff. But these games are much more like the type of game where if these skills are not developed in you as a player, you are going to have a bad time. You're going to get completely blocked probably at some point. And so, you know, there's an argument that even if it's only a 5% difference in a game like Resident Evil Requiem, you should play it that way to get better at other games. But it's also just way more fun. It's way more fun to think more and you're engaging with the game more deeply. You are, it's rewarding in that way, but it's also just really satisfying when you do choose correctly. Like I promise, if you do this well, you will notice the situations where, you know, naively you would have chosen the wrong way, but because you used your brain, you ended up choosing the right way. Like I promise you will notice situations like that. Like that happens to me all the time. And I promise that will be extremely satisfying. Okay. What how's the chat feeling about this? Are you following this rant? Are you following this rant? Like, yeah, other games. So again, this is not, I said at the beginning, this is not my favorite game of all time or anything. Like, you know, this is not my ideal game or my ideal any specific type of game does not really look very much like this. But I was able to enjoy it by thinking about it and approaching it this way. I will say, if you're interested in this kind of game, if you're interested in like trying to get into it and trying to play games that make you think in this way, or that, you know, help you get better at thinking in this way, and the games that you can try to appreciate in this way, I would not start with Resident Evil Requiem. Because, you know, they really don't want to punish you, right? Like, this is what I was saying about like the optional stuff in The Witness, about like Obra Dinn, about, you know, other detective games like that, like about like Outer Wilds. Like, those games are more, because they're not ultra mainstream games where you have to drag the lowest common denominator player along, they are more willing to punish you if you're missing something. And they're more willing to make something as subtle as exploration the focus more so, and more of a requirement to engage with the game. Which means that if you're trying to build that skill by playing those games rather than Resident Evil Requiem, you are more strong, you're more encouraged to do it. Like, you can do it in Resident Evil Requiem, but it's very much, you know, I would argue that it's the right way to play this game if you're actually trying to enjoy it, but it's very much not required to get through the game. And, you know, that just comes with the territory of like AAA games. Like, AAA games aren't forcing you to do super hard action challenges either, or solve super hard puzzles or whatever. I recognize that, as I kind of said this earlier, but I recognize that this is a style of gameplay that completely it's worth emphasizing just how much this contradicts the entire arcade design philosophy, right? So it doesn't surprise me that there are people out here like critiquing this game from an arcade perspective and just seemingly not understanding at all this other way that you can engage with it and have a much better time. Like, this approach to gameplay, this style of gameplay, completely contradicts arcade action gameplay. First of all, it's very subtle. Like, it literally doesn't work if the game forces you to think about any particular possibility. Like, you know, the game can stop you. A game like Obra Dinn can stop you from advancing in the game if you don't understand a particular thing, but it can't prompt you in the same way. It can't prompt you to think about this particular thing, right? It can't prompt you to be like, well, what do you think? Do you think there might be dogs outside? Where do you think the dogs might be? Like, that would ruin the game. That would completely ruin the whole point of this type of gameplay, is that you are going to have your own ideas. You have to notice what's around you and think about what that means for the game going forward, for what you haven't seen yet. Yeah, it doesn't really work if the game forces you to think about a particular possibility. It doesn't work if you use a guide, right? If you're following a guide through the game, you already know exactly what's going to happen, and that completely ruins everything for this type of gameplay. It only really works on a first playthrough, and, you know, all of that is very contradictory to, like, you know, the Electric Underground type of taste, type of way of engaging with games. So I understand where people are coming from, but, you know, that's just how it is. This is just a fact about games, is that they can be a lot of different things. And so, you know, there's this massive, interesting category of gameplay. This is my point here. This is what I want to get across. If you are that type of person, I would like for you to recognize that there is a massive, interesting category of gameplay that contradicts your philosophy. And, you know, you can take it or leave it. I can't force you to play games this way, think about games this way. But yeah, when you don't understand that this is a possibility that is there and that is interesting and that is deep, regardless of what you say about, you know, people will say any game that's not replayable is not deep. It's very clearly not true. It's very clearly not true. That's a perspective that you can only have if you have not played difficult puzzle exploration kind of games. So yeah, you can take it or leave it, but personally I will be taking it. Would I say traditional Zelda design philosophy is similar? Its combat isn't exactly focused or deep, but the level design and the formal constraints make it excel at exploration via problem solving. Yeah, you know, especially like, well, I was going to say especially within the dungeons, but, you know, maybe this is true to some degree with all the decisions that you're making about where you're going next in Zelda, and, you know, what you're expecting behind the next corner and things like that. And like how you expect the progression through the main story to work, to to proceed. Yeah, there's definitely some overlap there for sure. And again, I don't like. I loved Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask when I was a kid. Let me just put that out there. But nowadays, it's not really my favorite type of gameplay. Just like, or not really my favorite type of game in the same way that Resident Evil isn't. Like I enjoy keeping up with the series and playing these kind of games. But even if they made that older style of Zelda game that's more about exploration, it's still, I don't think it would stand a chance of like, making a game of the year list even for me, because I just, you can appreciate this kind of thing that I'm talking about so much more clearly and cleanly in a game that's like completely focused on it. But yeah, if you learn how to appreciate it from those other games and then bring that back to something like Resident Evil or something like classic 3D Zelda or 2D Zelda, it's really nice. It is a way of engaging with games that I highly recommend. But yeah, I was saying that, you can take it or leave it. I understand why people might want to leave it, why people might want to just always engage with games as if they're arcade games or whatever, because it does introduce new problems when you try to enjoy some games as arcade kind of games and other games as exploration games. Like, I mean, the main problem that introduces is how do you know which game this is up front, right? Like, how do you know when to play the game blind and when to start using outside resources? Because like, I use outside resources when I'm playing like arcade games pretty often. I'll often start playing them. I'll usually, maybe always, start playing them like more or less blind. But like I don't worry as much about avoiding spoilers for those kinds of games. I'll often read stuff or watch gameplay about a arcade shmup or whatever that I haven't played. And then when I get around to playing it, I don't feel that my experience has been negatively affected by knowing the things that I know about it. But yeah, there are some games where you really shouldn't do that, and where that is going to really mess up the experience. And yeah, so if you start caring about both of these kinds of gameplay and trying to appreciate both action and exploration gameplay, then this is kind of a complicated question that you now have to make for every game you play going forward, which, I mean, that makes it sound a lot worse than it is. Like, usually it's obvious, right? Like, arcade games generally were designed to be played as part of a community, right? Like, you're in the arcade, you're watching other people play naturally, like you can't avoid it. And you're talking to other people about it. And so, it makes sense to try to recreate that experience in the modern era as well. Like, reading stuff about it, watching really good players, looking up the world record run, like that's totally reasonable for most arcade games. And then like on the other end of the spectrum, like obviously a puzzle game is ruined if you know everything about it. Like if you know what's coming, if you know the solution, like a puzzle game is nothing. A puzzle game is literally nothing. That's not exactly true necessarily, because it can still like, you can still go through a puzzle game and see all the different applications of the mechanics and stuff like that. But I think in a good puzzle game, you're not likely to understand and process that very well if you're just kind of rolling through everything at a breakneck pace and like copying someone else's solutions. Like you kind of have to engage with it and think about it as you're going by solving the puzzles. So yeah, I feel like anything puzzle-based or horror-based as well, like obviously you don't want to know what's coming in those kinds of games. But sometimes sometimes it is less clear, and you have to you just have to give it a chance blind for a while, and if it doesn't feel right, then you change course and you try looking something up and go from there. Like, but yeah, it's complicated because like often a single game does have both types of gameplay within it. Like Resident Evil 9 is actually an example of this, because there's something called the final puzzle, which is super optional. But this whole time I've been arguing that the first playthrough should be blind in Resident Evil Requiem if you're really trying to appreciate it. But on the other hand, Resident Evil 9 has something in it called the final puzzle that literally no one ever is going to solve alone. I feel pretty confident that no one will ever do it. It has been solved, but like it took several days after the game's release for it to be solved at all. And I'm just amazed by how bad this gameplay is, by the way, this footage. It took several days for it to be solved, and it was only fully solved through data mining. The final step was solved through data mining. And yeah, so I'm not going to suggest that anyone is really doing the collectibles while this is ridiculous. This is why I need to get my own footage. What was I saying? Anyway, yeah, no one should try to solve that by themselves. And yeah, I was actually going through, here's my experience with this puzzle. I went through the first playthrough blind, and I was going through the kind of meta progression that this game has, where you're like the achievements in this game, you know, they tell you what the challenges are for the achievements inside the game and how many points you're going to get in the meta progression by completing each of those things, right? And so the goal of the meta progression, and this kind of goes with the expectations thing a little bit, like this is a type of routing. You kind of have to route multiple playthroughs. Like you go through one playthrough and you try to be reasonably thorough and, you know, understand most of the game on your first playthrough. But then you see all these challenges after that, and you kind of plan 1 or 2 or 3 more playthroughs where you're like, okay, I'm going to try to like do this. I'm going to try to like go through this playthrough without healing. And I'm going to do that on easy mode. I'm just going to breeze through it and try to do the speed run at the same time. But maybe like if I feel like I have time, I'm going to like try to do this thing along the way. And like I have some idea, like some of them are not super obvious. They're kind of puzzly, like try to get 2 zombies to fight each other. You're probably not naturally going to do that in your first playthrough. You have to think about how to potentially do that, what tools you could potentially use to make that happen. It's not like an amazing puzzle or anything, but like, you know, there are things to think about and things to plan, and you kind of have to plan this meta progression route. And that's at least a little bit interesting. It wasn't my favorite part of the game, but I was going through that and, you know, trying to appreciate that part of the game as well. And I was actually having a pretty good time and making smooth progress. And all of that came to a halt instantly when I started seriously trying to think about this puzzle. The final puzzle, actually, let me just play the video. This is just hilarious. Like, this is one of the funniest things in games in a long time. Like, we're just gonna watch this 8-minute video, okay?
Game challenge in Resident Evil Requiem that stumped the internet for several days after launch. The first time you finish Requiem, the final challenge will appear on the challenges list in the pause menu. It's the last one, and in English it reads, "Let the sweet pair hear the voice." But who exactly are the sweet pair, and what voice do they need to hear? We're gonna answer all of those questions right here. The sweet pair in question is Emily and Marie, but considering Marie has transformed into the big monster known as the Girl, she's not exactly cooperative. Instead of talking to Marie herself, we'll need to find her doll. A file labeled Subject 170 Record can be picked up from a rolling table just before leaving the first big test chamber. It mentions blood being collected from one.
Okay, first of all, no one even, no one reads this stuff, and, certainly no one is, looking for hidden codes in it, right? So anyway, here we go.
115 test subjects. This collection and processing happens in the basement, in the room appropriately titled Processing, near the collection pool. It's the one with the giant blood pool and the conveyor belt of corpses. As the note suggests, we need to wait for 115 bodies to be dumped into the blood here. Once you enter the room, don't touch the draining mechanism. It'll take about 15 minutes of real-world time to reach our number, so leave the game running and come back after a snack or something.
15 minutes later.
Once 15 minutes have passed, you can drain the pool and fight through the meat grinder sequence. Here's the thing, you shouldn't kill any of these zombies yourself during this scene. Shove them, kneecap them, shoot them a few times, sure, but make sure you don't do any finishing blows. Let the grinders at the end of the vat do the work. Once the process completes, you can continue through the rest of the basement sequence. When you return to the main care center, head over to the bathrooms in the west wing. This next part sounds silly, but it truly is part of the puzzle. Pick any of the toilets and flush it 8 times. Yes, really. The hint for this actually comes from the very first file you're given. During the Wrenwood Hotel sequence, Grace will open her inventory to read the investigation report. There's a photo in here of a dead body.
I'm just so curious that if you looked at this photo knowing that the clue was in this photo, not knowing what the clue is, but knowing that it's in this photo, would you would you know? Like, this to me is what totally breaks it. Like, everything else in this, like, if you gave me 100, 200 hours to like full autism this puzzle, I think I would have figured out everything else except for this poopy 8, right?
Beside a toilet, and the number 8 is faintly
Like, like, are you joking? That is so demented. This is just in a random file. There's like 100 files in the game, right? Like, you have no idea to look for this here. There's no clue to look for this here or anything
smeared
like that.
on the bathroom stall next to it. So, flush any toilet 8 times, then continue through the game as normal, all the way up to the escape from the underground lab. Once the tank bursts and floods the room with a bunch of blood, it's time to pay attention. Just before taking the stairs out of the blood, Marie's doll will be on the ground, ready for you to pick up. Everything we've done so far actually moved the doll through processing and flushed it down to this underground lab. What's more, Marie's doll is a permanent item. Finish the game on this save file, and it will still be in your item box when you start New Game Plus. Once you roll credits, it's time to move to the next phase. In your next playthrough, you'll have the Marie doll in your inventory box, ready to go for the rest of the puzzle. First, proceed through the game all the way through the basement sequence again. When you return topside, turn around and pick up the girl's severed hand from the ground. This is our key to the rest of the puzzle. Take the severed hand to any of the microscopes here at Rhodes Hill, and you'll get another model DNA challenge to solve. When you do, you'll see a cryptic message and a sequence: GGC, AAG, AUA, ACG, UGU, CAU. You can input the solution anytime after scanning the severed hand, but let's explain how to solve it first. The first symbol is easy to figure out. It's actually written right on the microscope in the blood lab. There's a small bit of text that says G equals 150 million. This is roughly the distance from Earth to the Sun, in miles. So, G equals Sun. Take note of that. Now for U and C. Both of those can be deciphered when you go to the house next to the helipad in the courtyard. Inside the VIP suite is an hourglass atop the desk, and if you rotate it, you can unscrew the hourglass itself, placing it into your inventory. Examining and tilting it will move the sand to the other side.
I didn't even notice this. Like, I found this hourglass and thought it was suspicious, but I did not even notice that you could tilt it and drain
And
the
if you
sand.
let it run for a bit, you'll find a hidden
And this is like such a tiny part of this puzzle.
message under the sand. U equals 380,000. This is the distance from Earth to the Moon, in kilometers. U equals Moon. We're halfway there. Proceed through the underground lab until you reach the control room. Immediately left of the door, you'll find the Grace Ashcroft blood analysis report on a desk. Read this file and scroll all the way down to find one line that's not like the others. C equals 4.2 LY. LY indicates light years, and 4.2 light years is the distance to the nearest star from Earth. C equals star in our DNA sequence, and that just leaves A. It turns out you don't actually need that part, but you won't know that without playing Leon's section at RPD. After confronting Mr. X, aka the Super Tyrant, you'll be able to explore the basketball court behind Kendo's gun shop. When you do, you'll see the head from the toy Uncle bobblehead on the ground. Kick it through the fallen basketball hoop to trigger a sound cue, then head back into Kendo's shop. The rest of the toy Uncle bobblehead is inside here, and now that you've kicked the head through the hoop, you'll be able to interact with it. You'll receive a message that says, just ignore A, and that's what we're gonna do. We only need G, U, and C from the severed hand DNA sequence. Now it's time to put it all together. Whether you do this on another playthrough, or you do it right after scanning the severed hand is up to you. The important thing is having Marie's doll and Grace's inventory and carrying Emily with you. So, before heading outside to the Rhodes Hill courtyard, grab Emily and go to the lead researcher's office on the second floor of the East Wing. This is where you got the sun quartz from the safe earlier in the game. Once you scan the severed hand, you'll be able to interact with the safe again and enter a new code. Thanks to the DNA sequence, we know what that is. Ignoring the letter A and converting everything else to symbols, we get the following code. Punch this in to hear a creepy child's laugh. Remember, the sweet pair is Emily and Marie, and the creepy laugh is the voice. If you're carrying Emily and holding Marie's doll in your inventory, the final challenge will be complete once you all hear the laugh. Congrats!
So, let me just say, I love this. I love that this is in the game. Like, this is so stupid. This is like beyond La Mulana levels of like unhinged riddle, like esoteric riddle, right? Like, I think this is probably harder than anything in La Mulana, and I have beaten La Mulana. I haven't done all the optional stuff, but yeah, I would never petition to have this taken out of the game or to not have this. I want this in every game. I want every game to, every like AAA game to have this just insane, unhinged riddle sequence in it, right? But or this kind of thing, not this exact thing, obviously, but I do think it's a poor fit. The way that it fits in is not good for a couple of reasons, and one of those reasons being related to what I was saying earlier about, you know, having to kind of choose whether you're doing exploration gameplay or whether you're doing action gameplay, and how you. Well, it's not really action gameplay. It's just this is a different way in which you often in games have to decide like how to engage with the game. Like, it's not just, you can't just have this one philosophy that everything is like an arcade game and you're going to approach everything as if it's an arcade game and you're just going to look things up and you're just going to, you know, care about the repeat playthroughs and care about like finding all the exploits and playing optimally as if it were an arcade game, right? And just taking whatever metric of success like the game gives you. Like, you know, this game gives you a completion time at the end of the run, so arcade game players are kind of latching onto that as like what you're supposed to optimize. That's like the score for this game, right? Whereas like, you know, I think for a normal player like engaging with this game and just trying to enjoy it, that's much more like, okay, it's there because, you know, there's a speed run challenge and that's part of the meta progression. That's, you know, the main way of enjoying the game. But anyway, you know, you have to realize if I had just let myself keep playing the game blind after I got to this puzzle, I would have had a horrible time, right? I would have had a horrible time. But I'm glad that it's in the game, and I think it was obvious enough, at least for me, it was obvious enough that I wasn't supposed to engage with this blind because of several decisions that they made, several design decisions that, like, this is clearly just not the type of game that supports riddles that span the full game, right? Like, there is stuff from all different parts of the game that are relevant for solving this. And if you're trying to solve it blind, you're going to spend a lot of time, like, you're going to think of some idea, like, oh, maybe this thing from this Leon part of the game is going to be relevant to solving this. And then you're going to want to go to that part of the game to check on something or to try something and see if it works. And that's going to take a lot of time because the way they designed the saves in this game, you only have a limited number of save files. You have maybe like 10 save files or something. I don't know exactly, but it's pretty limited so that you can't just go anywhere at any given time. I don't think there's like a load to a specific chapter even or anything like that. Like, you're going to have to replay a lot of stuff to get to a particular point to check on something. And like, you know, watching the solution to this puzzle, like, might give you the impression that obviously it seems ridiculous just watching this, even if you have no idea about the game, but I think it can give the impression that solving the puzzle is actually a lot easier than it is because it doesn't show all the things, it doesn't show all the red herrings, right? It doesn't talk about all of the things that seem like they might be relevant. The first thing that you think of when you see the phrase, "let the sweet pear hear the voice," like, okay, this is how you naturally engage with the puzzle, right? If you're playing the game blind and you see this puzzle, "let the sweet pear hear the voice." Okay, so you're thinking about these two things. You're thinking about what these two things mean: sweet pear and voice. And that could mean like, it could mean like infinite things. Like the sweet pear. I mean, the first thing that comes to a lot of people's mind, the first thing that came to my mind was there's a pair of zombie women who are like singing, right? Because you're thinking voices and you're thinking about a pair, like two of something. There are exactly two of these women singing zombies in the game. And, you know, that might seem like it might be relevant, but, you know, it doesn't really make sense. I don't think it makes sense to actually like explore that possibility very much. But just think about like when you get the severed hand. Like, I got the severed hand and I didn't think to put it under the microscope. I mean, if I had really started thinking about it more seriously, like that would have been one of the things that I would have done at some point. But it's not immediately obvious that you need to put it under the microscope. You might try bringing it to Emily, you know, like here's how I engaged with it. First I thought about the singer ladies a little bit, but then I realized, okay, it's probably Sweet Pear makes the most sense if it's Emily and her sister. I didn't know she was called Marie, but I knew that the sister had transformed into the girl, the monster, and I knew that I had the severed hand that came from the monster. So I thought that by having that in my inventory and then carrying Emily somewhere, I would be able to do the thing, right? That's like not true at all. Like, even if I had figured out, well, first of all, you can't figure out what the voice is until after you can't figure out what the voice in the riddle means until after you figured out all this other crazy stuff, all the really hard parts of the puzzle. Like, it's almost as if the phrase that signals the existence of the puzzle, let the Sweet Pear hear the voice, that phrase is almost a giant red herring. It's almost like a double red herring, because it gets you thinking about what is the Sweet Pear, and it gets you thinking about the voice. But the way to actually start making progress on the puzzle has almost nothing to do with that. Like, you have to figure out this flushing thing, and you have to figure out this, which is just in like random files, and you have to figure out this like putting all the bodies into the processing thing and like waiting 15 minutes and all of this stuff. Like, that is how you actually get to the point where you can even know what the voice is, or even reasonably have a theory about what the voice is. So like, it's the whole puzzle is like backwards in this weird way. Like, it doesn't clue you in properly to it. You could maybe start thinking about the severed hand because you're thinking about the Sweet Pear, and then that will lead you to this clue about like the sun and moon and all of this stuff, and you could potentially progress from there. But ultimately, you need this piece. The hardest piece of the puzzle to figure out is like the stupid toilet, which is like totally disconnected from everything else. I don't know. It's just bizarre. The way that the puzzle is like structured. Obviously they didn't like, I don't think they're not really puzzle designers, right? Like, I'm guessing whoever designed this just like thought it was funny and was just going to make a crazy sequence and thought it was interesting to do that, and wanted, likes community puzzles, and that's cool. Like, again, I like that this is in the game, but it is very like backwards in a way. And like, there's just been getting back to why I decided to look it up. There had just been enough stuff in the game that was a little bit unintuitive and unclearly signaled and not quite right. Like, the stuff in the story, like the way that they signaled which ending you're supposed to choose in the story, I felt like was not delivered very well. And yeah, the thing with the save files, like I mentioned, like it would take a long time to like figure out to do a lot of this puzzle solving or like testing ideas and stuff. So because of that, I decided to try looking it up. But even then, here's a tip if you're going to try to engage with games well. Like, if you're trying to play them blind and then you're thinking maybe it might make sense to look something up, but I'm not sure, you can always have you can pick someone else that who knows the game, or someone who can just look it up for you and whose judgment you trust, and get them. And this is what I did. I got Misa. I got Misa to look it up for me, and she was like, this seems completely outrageous. Like, you're never going to figure this out, or this is not a good use of time. And, so I stopped trying to figure it out, and I just watched the IGN video, and I think that was kind of the ideal experience, right? But yeah, that can kind of be a middle ground, right? Between, instead of just switching from all the way from like the exploration blind mindset to the I'm going to look everything up mindset all at once. Like, yeah, you can have someone else try to tell you, maybe they'll think, okay, you can probably figure this out, but maybe you need a hint for this one part, or maybe they can tell you like, I think you should try a little bit longer, or whatever. Like I said, it's tricky, and I understand why people would want to have a simpler, more static way of engaging with all games. But it's just how it is, right? It's just how it is. Not every game is the same. Not every type of game is doing the same thing. I mean, it's this, this is true of like other art forms as well. This is true of literature. Like, some books even have these crazy meta puzzles like this in them. But some books are much more spoilable than others. Some books, like, it's good. You will have a better experience with them if you know certain things going in, and some are really best to go in completely blind. Some books are much better on the second read, once you understand everything that's going to happen, and others are much more about the surprise. Like, a mystery story is much more about the surprise, whereas a lot of great works of literature are benefit from knowing everything that's going to be coming, and seeing how what happens at the beginning fits into this bigger picture, right? There's an art to that you appreciate more on future reads. But so yeah, I think if you want to, my general point here, my biggest thing is that if you want to engage properly with art in general, including in video games, you have to be willing to take different approaches to different things and judge different things by different standards and think about different types of games, of art, different types of games in different ways. And that's what I feel like is missing from the Resident Evil 9 discussion that I've seen. The more and again, I thought Mark's review was incisive as it often is, and insightful. And I agree with a lot of his points, but it also just misses this other thing that also matters a lot. And yeah, the other thing, I kind of got some hate for this on Twitter. I was saying like people just have unreasonable expectations for like big budget games. Like, okay, if this game had a $50 million budget or something, right? You just can't make that budget back by appealing to my taste specifically, right? By making the best game. If you make the best game for me, that does not make $50 million or even close. It does not make $50,000 if you make the best game for me, because you're optimizing for me at the expense of everyone else. And the same is true to a lesser extent if you optimize for arcade, people who share the Electric Underground's taste or whatever. Like, that is just not a big enough group to make that $50 million back. So this game just doesn't get made. Nothing remotely like this gets made if it's made for arcade players at the expense of everyone else. And games are expensive to make. You can't just spend a bunch of extra time on like difficulty. You could say like, they should have higher difficulty levels that are designed more for the hardcore players, but again, this is a mass market entertainment product. This is not high art. Resident Evil is not high art. It was much more artistic originally, right? When Mikami and when Kamiya were involved with the series, clearly, like you can tell, like Resident Evil 9 does not have the mood and the vibes and the you can just tell that there's a real artist behind in the gameplay as well. It's a little harder to explain why, but there's new things happening. There's new interesting stuff being explored, aesthetically and gameplay wise, in like Resident Evil 1 and 2 and 4 and stuff. But that's just not how it is anymore. That's just not what this series is. That's just not what any series is after that long, unless you're Ghosts and Goblins and you bring back the original guy and you make another game that alienates everyone and sells 0 copies in 2021 or whenever that game came out. Which, respect that Capcom did that as well. But that doesn't mean they're going to do that with Resident Evil, which is one of their biggest cash cows. Like, they want to remain in business. They want to keep making Resident Evil games because it makes a lot of their customers happy. And they are going to mainly put their money into their development time and effort into the stuff that is appreciated by their normal audience, not just some tiny subset of their audience that, you can tell that there's a disparity in how much effort they put into the first playthrough stuff and the normal mode stuff, the stuff that applies to everyone, versus the stuff that is like extra challenges for the hardcore players, like Insanity mode. They're not adding new types of enemies or new design patterns in Insanity mode. They're not making crazy challenges that take a ton of development time. Like, even this crazy puzzle, like, there's a little bit for that, and there's a little bit for Insanity mode as well. They like they changed some enemy spawns and stuff like that. But for the most part, the stuff that's going to be appreciated by a relatively small fraction of the players is stuff that's relatively low development effort. Like, we're just going to add a little flag. And add a challenge like, did you use any healing items in this run? And if not, you get an achievement. Like, that's very low effort. And yeah, I think to expect a game like this, that is an entertainment product, to try to push the medium forward, or not even that, just like be hardcore and like be challenging in a particular way, and yeah, cater to some kind of like niche taste is just kind of ridiculous. So when I think about these games, I try to appreciate them when they manage to appeal to me to some degree, despite being what they are, right? Like, yeah, I'm not gonna say this is a slop game. It's like a well-made game in a lot of ways, but like, it is kind of in the category of AAA slop, right? It's just not trying to be high art. So I think it makes much more sense to like you can say what you wish the game was, right? Like, you can say, it's totally fair to say the stuff that like the arcade people are saying, like, you know, I would like the game better if XYZ, you know, if set pieces were more involved and more difficult, if, you know, the spawns weren't static in the Leon section. I didn't talk about the Leon section enough, by the way. I should maybe go back and talk about that a little bit more. But I don't know. The same stuff I said about Grace applies to the Leon section, just not quite as much. But it is interesting. Well, I'll get back to it, maybe. But yeah, you can say X, Y, and Z would make the game better for you, but at some point it crosses over into expecting that, or thinking it's realistic, or thinking that your criticism is helpful or changing what this game is going to be. Like, Capcom is happy that these people who only like arcade games are like talking about their game at all, right? They're happy for the buzz. They, you know, they appreciate that they're creating more buzz around the game. Doesn't even matter that it's negative. But yeah, going back to the Leon section, I'll actually I just want to touch on this briefly because it does relate to what I was saying. Obviously, the Leon section is closer to being an action game. I was saying Resident Evil Requiem is not an action game, right? Obviously, the Leon section is closer to being a pure action game than the Grace section. But I think still it's a really missing a lot of the point to characterize it that way as the primary thing. The footage isn't really going to show this, right? But it's kind of more like a Metroidvania. It actually feels surprisingly like a 3D Metroidvania sometimes. You know, I'm talking about the big Leon section in particular. You know, this game has a lot of shorter segments that do different things and focus on different things, but those don't make up the bulk of the game, right? You know, the bulk of the game is like the care center and then this Leon thing, this big Leon section that we're in right now, where it's kind of, well, it's like a relatively dense space, and you're going around and searching for a few different things. There's different items you have to pick up, and there's items you have to pick up over here and then bring them over here and bring them back to somewhere that you've been before. You have to kind of do a little bit of backtracking, a little bit of like remembering where this particular thing was, and like understanding the map layout. You know, you come to understand this area, this relatively small area that's a little interconnected in certain ways. You have shortcuts that come back down to where you were before. All this stuff, like, it's very Metroidvania-ish, or like, you know, you could think Dark Souls 1 a little bit. It's, you know, you're not getting like upgrades like a Metroidvania, but in terms of how you think about the environment, it's like that. And that just, it's not my favorite type of exploration. It's weaker than games that totally focus on it heavy and like expect more from you, but it leaves room for you to do this kind of thinking that I'm talking about, this kind of engaging with the game and, you know, looking at everything that's happening, taking in your environment and thinking about it and predicting and anticipating what's going to happen. Like, you know, the stuff I was talking about Dark Souls, like enemies being around a corner and like traps and stuff like that. You know, this Leon section has a lot of that kind of thing. But even just in general, when you're walking through like normal areas that are going to have enemies in them, you want to be thinking about what gun should you have equipped right now? You know, do I want to be topped off? Is it worth topping off on health right now, even though it's going to kind of waste a little bit of this heal? You know, stuff like that. Like you are constantly anticipating what's going to be around the next corner, right? And and preparing yourself mentally to engage with that in the right way. Like always being ready to switch to a grenade and throw it quickly if there's like a group of enemies that pops out of somewhere or whatever. Like it's about more than the action itself. It's about what happens before the action. It's about your expectations of the action. Yeah, stuff like that. It's about how you play a section in your head before you even know that it exists. It's kind of a silly way to say it, but it's something like that, right? And yeah, Metroidvanias don't tend to have the most interesting like secrets or like, optional things to find. It tends to be pretty obvious, you kind of go through the game and you don't really have to use your brain that much. But 3D, first of all, you don't get many like Metroidvania-ish. You don't get this type of thing in 3D that often, as often as you do in 2D. But also, 3D makes it kind of more interesting automatically, or at least it gives a lot more possibilities for it to be interesting because there's verticality. You can look up and see something. You can see, oh, there's this. There can be an overhang way ahead of you, and there can be an item hanging from that overhang, and the game can reward you for thinking, oh, there might be something up there. Like that would be a funny spot for the designer to place something, or that's something that's somewhere that an item could be hiding, right? And like, oh, there's this little courtyard over here that's like off to the side. Like that just doesn't off to the side of this building. That you just don't have that third dimension like that in the same way in a Metroidvania, right? And yeah, they do a really good job with the hanging items that you can like shoot down from above and then go and find where you pick them up. They do a really good job of designing them so that the less obvious ones, there's some that are in genuinely like unintuitive spots where like it's not obvious that you can like jump out this window to get to this little garden or like grassy section to the side of a building, or it's not obvious that you can like go out of this broken building onto this scaffolding and climb up and around to this like different spot to like get this item. It hides those things like the scaffolding and the possibility of getting into that little side area. It hides them well enough that you often have the experience of seeing the thing hanging there and shooting it down and then not knowing how to get there. And so you have to actually think about the layout of the space. And I'm not gonna say it's ever actually hard to figure out how to get there, but you're rewarded for then thinking about like, okay, where is it most likely to be like, and a skilled explorer will be much more likely to go straight to the right spot and have that intuition. Okay, yeah, it could connect here and around that corner and up there. Like, yeah, that kind of stuff is cool. And also like planning your route through the area, thinking about which direction to explore first. Like you might be down at the bottom of a building, but it's like a tall shaft type of room with like stairs going all the way up, and you can see above you that there are parts of this room that have items. You can see that there are items up there that you haven't gotten to yet. And so when you see something like that in a game like this, you should be thinking, okay, well, you should be like building out the map in your head, right? The map of this area, building out the part of the map that you haven't gotten to yet, and you should now understand like, okay, so there is going to be some way to get to that from somewhere that I haven't gotten to yet. And then when you get up to that place that connects to that area from above to get those items, you can have a smoother experience because you anticipated that and you remembered that. And then you can just go straight to the items first. Like instead of having a 50-50, like I truly have no idea which way to go from here, which way is progress and which way is going to be items or whatever, like which way I would want to go to first. Instead of that, you have pretty good odds of going straight to the item direction first and then the progress later, because you remember, yeah, something somewhere up around here, it should connect back down to those items. And so, yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Like it is rewarding to think about this kind of stuff, even if the game doesn't punish you for not thinking about it. And that's really the most you can hope for, right? From this type of game. Again, like it's a mass market product. They have to make the playthrough smooth for, maybe it's not the most you can hope for, because you can hope that someone like Itagaki or whoever will come along who's like a real artist, a Mikami or whatever, who like wants to make the game with lower difficulties to appeal to the more casual player, but they also want to do the hardcore crazy thing on the higher difficulty. So you can hope for that. But the most you can realistically expect from a game like Resident Evil Requiem is the game is not going to punish you, because that would feel bad for the low skill players. But it is going to reward you. It's going to reward you with a smoother experience and a more satisfying experience if you are more clued in to the game to the environment, to the area that you're exploring and all of that stuff. Does that make sense?